Swiss, Kanako.
Tuck Talk is back in a special episode. Florida State's now 7 games in, and the last time we talked to you, Florida State was 5-1. They are now 5-2 after a tough loss on the road at Littlejohn Coliseum. And this is a really good episode. I think it's something we've wanted to do for a really long time, is have Matt Minnick, Michael Rogner on from Tomahawk Nation. They do you could argue the best job of anyone on the beat of breaking down basketball. I actually started, most of you know, my media career with Tomahawk Nation back all the way, I think it was 2014. And I learned a lot about the game of basketball from Rogner and Minnick, and we've become friends throughout the year. And the podcast that we've done now here with me and Bob, joining you guys to talk Florida State basketball. Those guys have their own podcast as well. You can find that on Tomahawk Nation, the TN Hoops podcast. And we actually, I feel like we both did this, both outlets did it around the same time, which is awesome to see a basketball dedicated podcast to a program that has badly needed it. So I want to say, I hope you guys had a great holiday, Bob, Matt, and Michael. And I'm excited to have all of you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is Matt. I'm happy to be on and looking forward to talk some hoops.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's fun to see our former young intern all grown up here. So thanks for having us on.
Yeah, I'm on Zoom, so you guys can see the freshly cut beard that I did it just for today. I had to be ready for you guys. So I went to the barber about an hour and a half ago to get cleaned up. And those of you listening on the pod, this should be a lot of fun. I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast also listen to Rogner and Minnick's podcast. And so the basketball community at Florida State, very tight knit, and we're ready to rock and roll. So without further ado, I think you've met everyone: Michael Rogner, Matt Minnick, Tomahawk Nation, Ariya, Massoudi, Bob Ferrante, Osceola, a roundtable edition of this podcast. All right. So let's get right in, right? Florida State, I think we have to start. Let's start micro and get more macro. And I'll start with Matt Minnick. Matt, Florida State, they lose to Clemson in a game that, if you look at the box score, the Tigers got to the free throw line. They were able to get past Florida State one-on-one, going north and south. And FSU's offense, again, turned the ball over at a really high rate, in something that's becoming a little bit of a theme. Do you think that those are areas that FSU can get better at, or are those real reasons for concern?
Yeah, and it's funny you say look at the box score, because as hard as it is to find some of these games that are on, ACC Net Extra 8, 2.7, I actually spent a lot of time looking at the box score before being able to find a condensed version of the game afterwards. And I don't know. So get to your question, the turnovers. There's 2 types of turnovers, live ball and dead ball, and we continue to see, I think, Florida State a lot of dead ball turnovers. Not necessarily new thing to the program, but it's funny that we actually Ken Palm will track your non-steal turnover percentages. So basically, that would typically be ones that are dead ball, and we're 182nd in the country, so not good. I think maybe that can get better, because as the team gets more used to playing with each other, some of the communication issues and whatnot will just get better by having more time. The fouls, that's been something Bob and Ariya, when we've been sitting in the tuck, we've noted from day one, this team is fouling a lot, and they're actually fouling the wrong people too. I know sometimes it's like, oh, well, gosh, they just keep shooting well from the free throw line against us. No, you're fouling their guards, and guards shoot better. And that's because you're allowing too much dribble penetration. So I don't know if the fouls are going to improve.
And Michael, I guess to kind of not ask you the same exact question, but to keep on that path, guard play. And Matt mentioned the guard play, defensively getting beat and offensively turning the ball over. Is Florida State, is guard play something we should be concerned about with FSU this year? Because you did lose 3 guys that, I know Williams wasn't much of a guard, but you could have made the argument that he was kind of a hybrid forward guard. Knowles did lose 3 guards last year, 3 really good ones. Is that something we should be concerned about, or do you think that those guys can improve offensively and defensively?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, they are going to improve, but it's also a major area of concern. If you look at just focus in on our losses, the UCF and Clemson. They didn't do anything special. They just spread the floor and got the matchup they want and attack the rim all night. And there's nobody on our roster who can guard some of those guys. And there's probably 2 or 3 guys on every ACC roster who has the capability to do that, and we just can't guard them. Our rotations are slow, our guards are big, and have a challenge kind of guarding those guys. So yeah, it is a concern. And then on offense, where's Trent? Like, where's the guy who's driving into the paint, and setting up everybody else? Where this has the potential to be, either the best shooting team that Ham has ever had, or at least one of them. But in order to do that, you got to be taking good threes, and be taking good threes, you got to be breaking down the opponent's defense and setting your guys up. And we're just not seeing that so far.
Bob, to get you involved here as well now, against Clemson and Florida State, you can't turn the ball over 17 times against a defense. I know Clemson had been turning people over, but then you started fouling a team that really doesn't get to the free throw line a whole lot. Do you think Florida State do you think going forward, this is a Florida State team that on the road, especially, they're going to have some trouble against some of these grinded out opponents that want to kind of get to the free throw line and slow the game down?
Yeah, I think so. And especially if a game is going to be called tightly. I don't want to get too deep into the criticism of officials and various crews and all that. But we're seeing some real deficiencies with Florida State. I mean, they've had more turnovers than assists against UCF and Clemson. Same number of assists and turnovers against Georgia Tech. That just leads you to tight games. It's an inefficient half-court offense. I think, Ariya, we mentioned this right before the holidays. This is a team with a lot of warts, and they've done a good job, I think, at times of, when one problem, say three-point shooting or free throw shooting isn't good, they've made up for it with something else by out-rebounding or, again, the three-pointers are making up when you're not making free throws. But when everything kind of hits the fan, and I felt like a lot of it hit the fan up at Clemson, you get a 10-point loss. I mean, that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah. And just to keep, again, we're going to stay micro on this and keep talking about Clemson. I know, Matt, that you watched a condensed replay and you saw some box scores. Rogner, I know you were able to watch pretty much the whole game, if not the whole game. One thing that I noticed, and I actually asked Ham this, I asked him this on the post game last night on the Zoom. I said, look, Florida State gave up 19 offensive rebounds, I believe, against Clemson. And I think it was like something like, 49% or whatever. I'm going to call it 50%. Clemson got half of its misses. Clemson is not a great offensive rebounding team. I was very surprised to see Florida State get obliterated by a team like that. And what I asked Ham was, naturally, Florida State's going to give up some offensive rebounds because of the way that they play defense. You're higher in the passing lanes. And for those of you that don't know what that means, listening, it means that you're further up the court. You're trying to deny the head of the snake from even starting an offensive set. And essentially, when you're pressing up higher up the court, you are going to give something away. Florida State's not getting the steals that they're normally accustomed to getting. So it's this kind of give and take, right? And I asked him, I said, you guys have always had this give and take where you're going to get some steals, and it's going to turn into 6 to 8 points a night, at least, because of those transition opportunities. And maybe the 3-4 extra offensive rebounds you give up, those don't, maybe the team doesn't come back to beat you on them. Do you think that Florida State can continue to defend this same way, Michael? I'm going to start with Michael. Do you think that Florida State can continue to defend the way that they are with this current roster? Because I look at that turnover percentage, and Clemson, a team I'm used to seeing, we always joke, Clemson is going to turn the ball over 20 times against Florida State. They had like a turnover percentage of only like 16% last night, which has to be like amongst the best Brad Brownell performances against a Florida State defense. Can we continue to play this way?
Well, I think you can, but do we want to? The Florida State's defense has been really bad compared to what we're used to the last couple of years. It's not a really bad defense when you look at the whole national scene. There's some major issues with it, but how can you clean some of those things up? there's been talk of switching to more traditional. Right now we switch screens 1 through 5, and there's talk of going to a more traditional, hedging certain ball screens. The problem with that is that when you're switching everything on defense, that takes away a lot of what teams are practicing for. They're constantly practicing their pick and roll actions, and you come in and play Florida State, and suddenly those things aren't available because Florida State's just switching everything. What it opens up is it just allows people to pick the matchup they want, and so. At this point, it's like 6 of one or half a dozen of the other, and Ham has to pick something and stick with it. My concern with this team switching now is that some of these guys, this is all they've been doing. For Polite, he's 4 years. This is all he's been learning, and the new guys are still trying to figure out what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And so to kind of switch midstream right now when you're already in ACC play just kind of feels awkward, and that's a little bit to do with the COVID season. We don't have all these, MEAC teams to kind of try this stuff out on and get up to speed. We got to do it against Duke and Syracuse. And those are tough teams to have big learning lumps against. So, the defense might be better if we switch, to a different system. But at this point, I don't know. I kind of hope that they just ride it out and try to figure something out by March.
Matt, why don't you think, just to kind of piggyback off of the same theme, why don't you think Florida State is generating those turnover percentages that we're used to seeing? Because it still seems like a very long team. In a lot of ways, that there's still wingspans everywhere. Scottie Barnes maybe isn't creating as much of a defensive havoc as we had hoped. But what have you noticed over 7 games?
Yeah, I really wish that we, the four of us or general fans, had access to the deflection numbers. I know that's something that the coaches track. And I guess I could go back and watch every single second of every single film and try to find every deflection. But just from the eye test during the games, it doesn't feel like we're getting that many fewer deflections. Part of me wonders if we're still talking about a small sample size. It's weird that we're already in January, but we've only played 7 games. And so part of me wonders if there's been deflections that have gone out of bounds, or there's a block shot that we just weren't able to get, or sometimes we've even noticed a couple of times, like we grab the steal, but someone, then steps on the inline or something. And I wonder if just there's been a little bit of just small sample, weird luck. I do think it's noteworthy that so we lost the 3 people who maybe had the highest natural basketball IQ on the team last year. You talk about Devin Vassell is just in another level of sort of seeing the game defensively, and even if you're looking at him with the San Antonio Spurs, Greg Popovich is arguably the best coach in basketball right now of all of basketball, and he's already playing him as a rookie, saying this guy gets it defensively. And Trent Forrest had a high basketball IQ, and Patrick Williams was, sort of ahead of his time in terms of being able to switch defensively and make the kind of plays he made against Tennessee and Louisville of getting into the passing lane. So I think we lost 3 people who just worked well together. And again, to my point in the beginning, it's we're new. You have people that are playing different roles, even if they're on this, even if they were on the team last year, they're being asked to do different things. And anyone who's ever switched a job knows that that's hard to do, to switch what you're used to. So I'm kind of with Rogner. I'd like to see us stay the course. And I wonder if some of these things would start to naturally just get better, admitting that we may be a bit more high variance this year for a lot of reasons. A lot of teams, I think you're seeing at both the NBA and college level, there's bigger blowouts, right? So we may not have as many of these closer games that you can find a way to win at the end.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt, 100%. And, I think it's important, right, for people to have a perspective and view this through a scope and a lens of all college basketball right now, outside of really 5 teams, maybe 10 teams, looks not great. I think everyone knows Gonzaga looks worlds beyond everyone else. Iowa, you can pick your five. You can pick an Elite Eight right now and say,
Baylor.
I think those are the 8 teams, right? And maybe a Creighton. There's some teams that look solid, and you go, okay, they're a little further along. But I think you have to view this season's scope as like you didn't have the offseason that you're accustomed to having to kind of build towards where you are. And Rogner alluded to it a little bit in that you're going to have to learn right now against the Dukes, the Virginias, the Carolinas, and Syracuses of the ACC, rather than getting those warm-up games where your deficiencies can be masked by just being more athletic than your opponent for 7, 8, 9 games. And for FSU, we made this big, we've always made this big deal and for rightful reason of culture. Well, they haven't had a chance. Balsa came on one of the post games and said, I really haven't had a chance to work with the team a whole lot. I had to do a lot of individual stuff on my own due to the pandemic. They haven't been able to do the sand pits and all those stuff that you always see, like the culture building stuff that allows this team to be close. So I think that's important perspective. And my next question is for Bob. Who is going to be the leader of this basketball team? Who steps up? I know me and you have talked about this a little bit in the parking lots, center when we're leaving the arena, but Florida State, I mean, for the first time, and I could argue 5 years, maybe 6, there's question marks as to who the guy is in that huddle at the free throw line, who pulls everybody in and is just kind of reassessing. I always look at those free throw line huddles as like their own timeouts, right? Like you don't need to go to a 30-second to the coach if you have an extension of it right there at the huddle. Who on this team do you think, if they're not there now, who best embodies that ability and maybe we'll see step up come February?
That's what's tough is the coaches have told us in Zoom interviews, Anthony Polite is a great leader. Raekwon Gray is a great leader. MJ Walker is a great leader. We're going off who we're told. We hear that there's leaders on this team. Now, are those guys more quiet leaders? Whereas, can you imagine a T-Man or a Trent Forrest a little bit fiery? Maybe it's a different type. It's maybe an alpha type of leader. So, is that part of it? Is that just a feeling out process? I did see, and I was very curious. That's what sparked our conversation. Ariya was Adrian Crawford mentioned that I think on Twitter. After the game against Clemson, that once this team finds a true leader, somebody who's going to kind of will them along, it's going to start going places. And I guess I was operating under the thought that there are some guys who have been with this program for 4 years. They should be leaders. I'm kind of questioning, why is leadership a concern 7 games in? And maybe that's kind of just one of those things that it's kind of sticking with me with how is that going to shake out the rest of the season?
Matt, I'll throw it to you to kind of give your thoughts on that same question.
Yeah, you're running point here, Ariya, but maybe I can do a little give and go here.
Sure.
I do. You with your experience with the women's basketball team, you probably know better than most. It's really, I don't know, onerous maybe, or just difficult right now just to be a student athlete. You already have a lot of issues, right? You already have you have a weird class schedule. This is pre-COVID, right? As someone who was a student athlete, you're constantly having to shuttle between practices and weight room and rehab and your class, and you've got a girlfriend or whatever that's talking to you, and then they're going out of town and a final exams due or a paper. But now you throw on this extra stuff of every single little protocol with COVID. And I think you're right to ask the question, where is this leadership? I know when I was watching the game cast and Florida State's up at the half, the last few years, you just, whether it was T-Man or Trent, you just thought, great, 5-6 point halftime lead. I mean, this is over. We're going to come out. We're going to establish in the second half, let them know that this is it. And those guys are going to kind of squeeze the life out of the team for 20 minutes. And Trent Forrest is going to salt this win away. And it's funny that both losses we led at halftime. We led UCF at halftime. We led Clemson at halftime. It felt like the game was in control, and all of a sudden it spiraled out of control. And so maybe I'll pitch it back to you. is it hard right now to be a student athlete and going like just to be a leader, to like step up and be around guys and do the normal things that maybe a teammate would have done?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll toss to Rogner here in a second too, because I have a question for him that kind of piggybacks off what you just said there. But yeah, I'm in this weird, like, I don't want to say weird. Weird's not the right word. I'm in a unique age group right now in my life where, 26 years old. Some of the seniors are 23, some of the older ones. So I get a chance to be able to talk to some of these players, men's and women's, on a level that maybe goes a little bit, more deeper than just surface level that they're comfortable of talking about the relationships that they have with maybe other media members or staff members that are around. And I have texted with some of these guys and some of the women's basketball players and messages on Instagram and whatnot. It is weird because, believe it or not, they're used to their workout routine. They're such creatures. Athletes are creatures of routine. Every last one of them. They have a routine and they stick to it. And you've kind of thrown the routine off, and they don't really have this break of a social scene where they can all kind of go out and have a chance to just kind of relax with each other and build relationships with each other off the court, right, or in that locker room. So on top of not getting to go to class, on top of not really having life be ABC, it's hard enough for us, right? Like I'm 26 and you guys have, some of you have kids and some of you have, you guys are really, you guys have lived a lot of life and it's hard for all of us, right? Like imagine 18 to 23-year-olds being told, hey, adapt to this. I don't know that it's possible, which is why I think everything has to be seen within a scope. And yeah, you're right. Boyfriends and girlfriends are a thing that happen. And I don't ever, you never really know what somebody is going through mentally. Or, Raekwon Evans, has a reaction to Keontae Johnson falling over in front of the court. And you hear from Ham that Raekwon saw somebody die from a similar thing. And so, it's difficult. This is not a year where everything is all basketball. I don't think minds, as you saw in football as well, no one's mind is completely on the sport that they're playing right now. And so those routines have kind of been thrown off. And but routines, I don't just mean routine as in like get up at 6 a.m. and, go to your workout, go to your class, come back to practice. I mean like routine is in like mental routine of like, this is how life goes for a student athlete. It's completely been thrown out of whack.
And I want to clarify, too, that I realize that other teams are dealing with the same thing. I'm not trying to suggest Florida State is alone in that. But Florida State doesn't have 10 blue-chip recruits like University of Texas does. Florida State doesn't have 9 5-stars or whatever that Duke and Kentucky, who's 1-6, has. And so one of the ways we've been able to mitigate that and overcome that is with this incredible culture and with this incredible team chemistry. And so you add a year where team chemistry is, frankly, pretty hard. And that's where I go back to, I don't know that we're necessarily a bad team, but I do think that there's a lot more variance in the performance from night to night than maybe what we're accustomed to seeing.
And that's why I mentioned earlier that if you look around college basketball as a whole, not a lot of teams are very good. I mean, Michigan State's not very good. And it's bizarre to watch. And I do believe teams will get better as they adjust to this, in February. By February, I think a lot of the basketball teams will be a little bit better than where they are now. But Michael, back to the leadership question. Do you think that Scottie Barnes might have to end up being kind of that vocal leader?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to lead a team. One is like the Tim Tebow method of you yell and you scream and you cry a lot and you shake people and pretend you're an assistant coach and you just sort of take control. And the other one, the other way is that you're just better than everybody else. And if you go back, sorry for the freshmen in the room, but if you go back to the Michael Snare years, it's so if you haven't heard of Michael Snare, just Google him. He was the best guy on that 2012 team by far. And he didn't come into FSU as a natural leader, but at some point they just deferred to him because he could do things on the basketball court that they can't do. And if you look at Scottie Barnes, you're 7 games in, you got like 22 games before you become a millionaire. Now is the time to assert yourself. And I think that's one way that we could see this Florida State team sort of develop a little bit of leadership, is that Scottie Barnes can do a lot of things on the basketball court that nobody else out there can do. And, just if he's a little more assertive on the court and doing those things, the players were just sort of naturally, attract to him. And he has shown a little bit in the early games that he can be fiery and vocal, yelling. During the Gardner-Webb game, you could hear it on the broadcast. He's constantly yelling to the bench every time FSU gets a stop. It was good to hear. So I think there's a little bit of hope there. We're pinning your hope on a freshman is never probably a good idea, but he is a unicorn, so we'll see what he can do.
Bob, it's got to be pretty difficult for a freshman to come into college right now, right? I mean, especially with the pandemic and everything. I have asked myself with some buddies of mine, we get in a little text group and we wonder, would Scottie be better if this was a normal year? We've seen flashes, but would he be more consistent if this was a normal year? But then again, Scottie's personality's not always been, and I mean personality as in basketball personality, on-court personality, not always been the kind of guy that wants to take over a basketball game by putting the ball in the bucket. And that's kind of every basketball fan's idea of a takeover guy is how much points does he score? Is he Kobe, right? Like people are like Kobe's takeover. Why? Because Kobe scores 30 in the fourth. That's what people think. But sometimes you can be a leader in other ways too. And I just wonder your thoughts, Bob, on do we have to kind of be patient with Scottie as well? Because he's kind of going through some crazy things for an 18-year-old.
Yeah, I kind of said this, back in football season too. I said, we can't evaluate the football team based on wins and losses. And everybody's going to say, well, they were losing a lot. They were losing bad, and it was ugly. But sometimes with basketball, there's going to be growing pains because of, my goodness, you lost 2 lottery picks and a Trent Forrest. And I mean, Dom's over in Europe. You're not going to look like last year. And I think a little bit of it is, not to put this on Leonard Hamilton, but he kind of built this team up through the offseason and said, I think we're going to be as good or maybe even better than last year. And I think he maybe needed to hit the brakes a little bit because the fans and the media kind of ran with that. I mean, that's our job, is to take what we hear from coaches and players, because we don't see an exhibition season. We don't have access to open gyms or anything. This was the most crazy offseason. So when you look at Scottie, we literally didn't know what Scottie Barnes looked like until, less than a month ago, which sounds crazy. And I think you just have to limit how much you want to put on his shoulders in all capabilities, because he's not a natural shooter just yet. But man, his passing and his willingness to drive to the bucket and make crazy degree of difficulty shots is super cool to watch. But yeah, I mean, we have to kind of hit the brakes on just how much is on his shoulders, I think.
And I guess this could be a very unfair question, and I'll start with Matt and then go to Michael, just to keep the Scottie Barnes theme going. But and this could, again, like I said, it could be unfair. Has Scottie surpassed, met, or underperformed to the level that you thought he would be 7 games into this season? Matt, we'll go with you first.
I'm going to take the over. I'm going to say he's surpassed my expectations. Okay. And I think I'll caveat that by saying that I expected him to be a good playmaker, and he has been. And I expected him to be able to be very versatile on defense, and he has been. He's there's been some games he got into some foul trouble, and we all wish Ham would maybe play guys with 2 fouls or 3 fouls a little longer, but I didn't expect him, and let me make sure I get the number right here. He is 5 of 18 from 3. I think that 18 is more than I would have expected him to take through 7 games, and 5 is more than I would have expected him to make through 7 games. I mean, he's almost making 1 3 a shot or a game. Now, let's be honest, 28% from 3 is not what we would call great shooting, but I think he is making and taking enough of them to at least make defenses think about that. And, for a long time, and all 4 of us had talked about how we wish a Trent Forrest would have taken more, he passed up so many open shots. And so my hope is that as Scottie becomes more comfortable with the physicality of the game, and as Scottie becomes more comfortable with where his teammates are going to be on the court, my hope is that it's actually going to open up a little bit more for him because he has shown that he is willing and able to make and take threes. So I'll say that he has slightly exceeded my expectations, and Florida State as well. I actually figured we'd be 5-2 at this point. I maybe would have figured a loss to like you. I don't know if it would have been UCF, but I figured that when you looked at the schedule, 5-2 might be about the record too. So,
all right, Rogner, we'll throw that to you, Michael, and what you got for us?
I'd say he met them, and it's kind of the same thing that I would have said at this point last year with Pat Williams. Like, Pat was pretty quiet in those early games through December, but he would show these flashes where you're just like, holy cow, that dude can play. And then by the end of January, he was arguably Florida State's most valuable player for the rest of the way. He just took over, and so I'm kind of anticipating the same trajectory with Scottie Barnes. And the one thing that has kind of surprised me a little bit is his playmaking ability is really good. And he was playing behind Cade Cunningham last year in high school, or playing beside him. Cade Cunningham's totally ball dominant. He always had the ball in his hand. So Scottie didn't get a chance to be a playmaker. But if you look at his assist rate, which he's assisting on 35% of the baskets when he's on the floor, and that's second in the ACC, which is surprising to me. So
does that mean we don't have anyone else who can pass when he's on the floor, or is he just doing that good a job?
Well, you got to tune into Wyatt Wilkes. He's had some dimes. So, yeah, no, but Scottie has he's asked to be ball dominant, which he has not been before, and he's done a pretty good job at it. And then he just makes a few freak show plays every game where. Last night somebody comes down with the rebound, he just takes it from him. Another time, he gets down to where he can actually rebound, and he's just effortless, going over these guys. So, he's the freak show, and I think that come probably early to mid-February, we're really going to see that a lot more than we're seeing it right now.
Yeah, and I guess for me, kind of wrap up the Scottie Barnes talk. My opinion on it so far has been, I think it's right in the middle of met to surpassed. I'm not going to go surpassed because surpassed to me is like triple double or close to it every night, to where I'm just like, man, this guy's even better than anything I ever dreamed of, which is, the word surpassed. I'll go met because what impresses me about him, the two things, Matt kind of alluded to one of them. I don't cringe when he takes a three anymore. There was a point where I was like, please don't shoot it. And now he lets it go. And in rhythm, like when he catches it and he's moving towards the basket and he catches, you go, all right, I actually see kind of a pretty nice form for something that'll develop in 4 or 5 years into something pretty good. And, he's probably 10% better than I thought he would shoot from three. And I know he's only made 5, but that's one. 2, while I think he's not a true point guard for a college system, for a pure half-court college, a college system that's going to see these gap defenses that Clemson and Virginia and the zone that Syracuse is inevitably going to throw at him, and some of these other teams that FSU might face in a tournament setting, right, like in the Big Ten. I marvel at the way I look up and he has 6 assists in a basketball game. It just like it comes so easily to Scottie. And that's how you know that he's a talent, and that when he does put it all together, you're going to have a guy who averages probably 9 or 10 assists in the NBA a night, just because of the way he's built and the way that he has been kind of groomed, his basketball IQ. And I'm with Rogner that I think by February and early March, you're going to kind of see Scottie put more consistent performances together, where there'll be 14 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. And maybe there's a game when it matters the most. It's a second round or a Sweet 16 where Scottie goes off for 25, 15, and 8. And you go, man, that's what we've been waiting on. Because he's shown flashes of it. And if a guy shows flashes of it at any point at 18 years old, I can start to dream about it. He took over against the Gators, whether they're a Keontae Johnson list or not. Against Indiana in overtime, he showed me that he's a gamer. He wants the ball when it matters. And there have been other moments too where he's just completely the full court Euro step behind the back on Michael DeVoe in Georgia Tech that he did, where Dan Bonner couldn't believe his eyes that a guy 6'9" is doing that. I mean, Michael DeVoe didn't know what to do. He was like, this guy just Euro stepped around me like he was Alamir Dawes. Like it's a small guard. And that's the type of thing where I am in between on met and surpassed, because it's like he does things on the court where you go, I didn't even think he could do that. But consistently, I will go to he has met my expectations. And I agree with all of you that if he decides to turn into the on-court alpha, not just the personality alpha that he is in the locker room, that fun guy, people are going to be, Scottie Barnes is going to be a first-team All-ACC if the trajectory finishes the way I think it will, in my opinion. I think he's an All-ACC type of performer. So we'll see how that goes. Scottie, a very exciting prospect, and definitely I think he's been part of the reason FSU's at 5-2 and not maybe 4-3 or 3-4 the other way around. All right, fellas. So let's get a little bit more macro on this Florida State team. Do you alter your projections? We'll start with Bob. What were your projections at the beginning of the season for FSU, and have you had to adjust any of your thoughts on them as you've watched the first 7 games?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, honestly, how many games were going to get played. I mean, we saw just so many cancellations that I didn't think about win-loss. I think what has stunned me at times are like the missed free throws. That's caused me to kind of have question marks. Why do you make them one night, miss them the other? The turnovers, again, just so high. I don't know what to expect from this team, but I think, like you guys have said, have patience with it. And what we're going to see in February is far different from what we're seeing now, what we're going to see in January. I think we're seeing more of the growing pains that I think we expected. Whereas, again, going in, the coaches were saying, hey, this is going to be as good of a team as it was last year. And in the back of our heads, we were all thinking, how can it be just as good as last year? Because that was an incredible run. Like you can't bottle that up and subtract, 4 key pieces and expect it to be just as good. But I mean, shoot, if they pull off a couple wins here down the road, if they pull off maybe not a Duke, but a Carolina, a Louisville, maybe they get back at Clemson here, Miami. I mean, this is going to shape up to be a really good season, and you're just kind of building momentum for the NCAA tournament.
Matt, we'll go to you.
I think from a record wise, I'd say, like I already said, I think they have met my 5-2, and I'll go on record right now and say I think they're going to beat Duke. I felt earlier in the week, I felt that Duke is a better matchup for us than Clemson was, especially Duke at home. We shoot well at home. And when we make shots, we can get our defense set to get stops. So I say we'll take Duke. So record-wise, I don't think at this point I'm ready to have to reassess my expectations. I came into the year thinking that we would have more losses than last year because it's going to take us a while to get like our feet under us. But I came in thinking that by the time March came around, we would have kind of gelled into a good team that had Sweet 16 potential. I kind of viewed it as like last year's Final Four capable, this year's like Sweet 16 capable, and maybe next year is back to being Final Four capable. I do think I need to adjust my expectations of actually like the product on the court. And I know it's weird to say that I think the record might be similar, but the product is worse. I think a lot of people's product is worse, as we've sort of talked about in this podcast. So I still think we're probably top 3 to 4 or 5 in the ACC, but everybody's product is a step down. And so I think I need to, like, everywhere from the reffing to the turnovers to the shooting, I just need to reassess how I'm watching the games and what I'm looking for signs of progress. But from a record standpoint, I don't know. Ask me again in 3 weeks and maybe I'll have a different answer. But right now I feel like, sure, maybe 13-7 in the ACC if we played all 20 games.
Yeah, the loss, the loss to Clemson is not a big deal at all. If you look at Ken Pomeroy, they're projected to win the conference. It's not a bad team. Loss to UCF is a bit concerning. But I'm thinking back to the preseason pod that Matt and I recorded, and typically 100% of whatever I said on that pod would be accurate. But I think that I actually remember one thing that wasn't accurate is that I thought that the defense was going to be a little better and could carry this team while it was figuring out the offense. I assumed that the offense was going to be a bit of a mess, but that the defense would be a little better. And so I am concerned, that our defense is just getting abused, and luckily we have a staff which is some of the best defensive minds in college basketball, and I think that they'll get it sorted out eventually. But that's a concern, and that's one area where I think that we're not as good as I thought. Record-wise, we're exactly where I thought we'd be. I mean, I assumed we'd lose to either Florida or Indiana, and then probably one more. Luckily we did not lose to someone like Gardner Webb or if a lot of ACC teams have bad losses on their resumes, and Florida State is totally fine where that's concerned right now. So, a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but it's kind of a wishy-washy season. So.
No doubt about that. Michael, we'll keep it with you here real quick. And this can be a quicker answer. Can you give me what's been a pleasant surprise for you, and what's been maybe the biggest disappointment through 7 games?
Anthony Polite is suddenly the best shooter in college basketball, which is nice. I mean, he's like 51 or 52% or something from deep. It's like, if that guy is open, I would shoot the ball, dude. It's like he is. We've had some of these guys, in the past, like PJ Savoy. He's like a really good PJ Savoy. He hopefully has the green light whenever he wants. And I was so excited to talk about Polite. I forgot the other part of your question.
And it was the more downer of part of the question. What's been the biggest disappointment? And it could be a player or a certain area of the game that Florida State's struggling in.
Can I talk the refs?
Yeah, I love it. I love shitting on the refs. So go ahead.
Yeah, you probably don't want me to. I mean, if you've seen my Twitter avatar, it's a ref given the charge signal. I've given this rant 100 times, so I'm not gonna do it on your show. I appreciate you having me on, but college basketball has had 15 years or something of shitty refs that they've had the opportunity to fix it and they refuse to do it. And it's especially awful this year because, they're behind in the same way that players are behind in terms of game action and being good. And if you watch any game, not just Florida State, if you watch any game, it's painful how bad these guys are.
Bob, we'll go to you here. Something, or maybe the most pleasant surprise, and so far maybe the biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I was going to say Polite too, because honestly, I can't tell you how much I've almost written him off. As far as going into last year, he wasn't really a guy I expected very much from, and just to see him continually take on an expanded role and be that guy who, when he puts up a three, you expect he's going to make it. The free throw shooting from Anthony is kind of a big question mark. Why doesn't he make free throws consistently? But the thing that drives me nuts, frankly, going back to the free throws, this team is going to get to the line. They're going to get fouled. They're going to get to the line. But you can't win a bunch of games when the season average right now is about 69%. That's just not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it when all these games are going to be super tight games. I turned them out. I can't remember what game it was, if it was Gardner Webb or one of the prior games. And we were talking about how free throws are repetition. He just said rhythm. It's got to be something that you go to the line and I'm going to drill 2. We're getting these 2 points, and that's it. It's not. I have the mindset of I got to make 1 here, or coach can get on me or whatever. You got to make them. You really just got to. And for this team to leave points out there at the free throw line, I think that that's when I see in the forecast it's going to come back to bite him.
Matt, go for it. I know they've both said Anthony Polite.
I was going to say, I'll echo that. Anthony, if you listen, I agree. You've been a very pleasant surprise. Keep shooting from that left corner. To say someone different, I'll also say Raekwon Gray's.
You took mine. Okay.
Okay, his conditioning. Listen, everything we've talked about, this being in a weird year and a unstructured offseason, and Bolsha even said like they didn't even get to come be part of the team. For Raekwon to do what he had to do and come back in shape and ready to perform and ready to be probably our best defender, kudos to him. For the disappointment, I would say just like the entire bench. Honestly, I'm disappointed that I expected, I think, more from Malik coming in, from Raekwon Evans. I know he's been dealing with some of the emotional challenges. I think I expected more from Tenor and Gam. So I just the bench in general.
Then mine will be my biggest surprise so far. I can do a two-parter for both of them. Tie between Raekwon Gray's ability. He's gotten better. He's still fouling too much, which is getting him off the court. And FSU really needs him on the court. His projection, or his trajectory is a better word, has been impressive. I didn't think he would ever turn into even what he is right now. And I think he's going to get better and better at this point after seeing some of what I've already seen. Balsha's improvement has also been a pleasant surprise. I thought that he would be a good player, maybe by his junior year. By his senior year, I thought he would be a very good basketball player. But by his sophomore year, he's having some dominant performances. And I see some tendencies where I think if he learns to play defense without fouling and he can stay on the court, I'd love his offensive game. I know Michael and Matt, you guys and I have talked about how Balsha just kind of has this innate touch and offensive feel that an FSU big man hasn't had maybe ever at Florida State. I'm trying to think. Fiondu became a better player, but like a very true post that does all his damage down low. Balsha has been awesome. So I think by February, he's another one. And I'll tell you what, Stan Jones actually came on Tuck Talk, Bob remembers this, and said, I asked him who would win between 18-19 and 19-20's basketball team in a game. And he said he would take the 19-20 team. And I thought, oh, okay, because of Pat, right? Like that. I said, so because of Pat? He said, no, because of the way Balsha had started to play at the end of the year. I thought he was going to be a difference maker against if he had to play the 18-19 team. And that's why he said, I felt like we could have won a national title, was because the way Balsha had come on, in addition to the way Pat had become comfortable completely in his role. Not to mention Trent's Trent, and Devin Vassell can get whatever bucket he wants on his own. So I thought that was interesting. So those are my two disappointments, also a two-part. The first one, not as much. Sadar Calhoun, I thought, would make more of an impact than he has. Matt actually asked me over under 43s, and I thought at one point that I was being ridiculous by saying the under. But Matt, if you remember, I actually did say, I don't know if he's going to be on the court enough to get to 40. I did say that. And so I was hoping I was wrong. And after he made a couple early on in the season, I said, dang it, Matt, I want to change my pick. But now I want to rechange my pick back to under 40 because I see he has a really good offensive skill set, right? Like it's not just the three. I see an ability to like break somebody down and kind of get to different spots on the floor because of his athleticism. I just kind of thought it would be a little bit more put together by this point. And then the other disappointment is the ball handling. I think we all assumed Barnes would have some learning and growing pains, but I think we all assumed Evans would just be this calming force. I know I kept saying that, but looks like it's going to be a little bit more of a project there. I think we have to accept that neither Scottie nor Evans, Raekwon, is a natural college point guard. And we all saw Trent turn into one. We saw XRM kind of turn into one. I'm not sure that the answer is going to be this year, and he might be in high school right now, playing somewhere. And I believe he's in Pennsylvania, I want to say. Sounds right. I think. Is that where Jalen Worley is? I think I'm allowed to say his name. He signed. I'm pretty sure I'm clear to say his name. All right, so it doesn't matter where he plays. Jalen Worley. Anyway, those are mine, positives and negatives. And all right, so we're about the time where we need to wrap up. I just want to ask you guys each maybe one more question. Florida State versus Duke. We do like to keep it current if we can. I'll start with Bob and go through the panel. Does Florida State knock off Duke on Saturday in Tallahassee? Bob, go first.
I say the best shot Florida State has, honestly, is Duke hasn't played since December 16. I mean, to try and get back on the court for them and to not look rusty is going to be a really, really tall order, especially in Tallahassee. I mean, if you ever wished this could have been a packed house to play a rusty Duke team, this would have been it. But I think you're going to have to be happy with about 2,600 fans. And, I mean, I can see Florida State pulling this one out. I think I have my doubts, but this should be a really fun one.
All right, we'll go Michael and Matt to finish it off. Michael, go first.
Yeah, I think if it's a classic Florida State Duke game where it's up and down, they're letting them play. Then in that situation, I think Florida State wins easily. If it's another game like Clemson where they're calling it super tight, then I would probably change that pick to Duke. But I think that the refs are gonna. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I think that the refs are gonna let them play, and it should be a fun game. And I think Florida State will pull it out.
I already said I think we're going to win, and they really only. I mean, they beat Notre Dame on the 16th of December, but other than that, they beat Coppin State and Bellarmine. And I don't know. I think that they're freshmen. They're reliant on freshmen. And so those people are going through the same thing that Scottie Barnes and our first year guys are going through, and tough year. And FSU shoots better at home typically. So I'm going to expect us to come out, make our shots, get our defense set, force some turnovers, get out in some transition, and find a way to get the win.
I'm going to take Florida State by double digits. I know that's that, and I'm not saying it's going to be like 20 points or like Carolina style 2012 with Dulkes. I think Florida State hit some free throws to end up winning the way that UCF and Clemson kind of pushed it to double digits at the end. And the reason is, Matt kind of alluded to it, they haven't played since December 16th, Duke. There's going to be some rust for the Blue Devils. I actually think Florida State playing on Tuesday benefits them as it pertains to this matchup specifically, because everyone kind of come back from the holiday break, and I think Florida State kind of got the rust kicked off a little bit, at least conditioning wise. And as you guys all know, basketball conditioning is different than any other conditioning. You have to be like in season shape. You can't practice to stay in shape, which is why you see people huffing and puffing after missing 2 weeks of basketball. I actually think I really like Florida State in this one. We do shoot the ball well at the Tucker Center. I expect 10 or plus threes from FSU. I think it'll still be pretty loud in the Tucker Center, relatively speaking. It should be fun, 8 p.m. on a Saturday. And I don't think FSU is going to be sleepwalking the way they did against UCF, which was a similar situation. So I really think this group of kids is a prideful bunch. And I don't think I don't think that, I think it's still a good enough basketball team to come home and take care of business and kind of remind people that this is a very good Florida State basketball team. They may not be elite. I don't know that that's the right word, but are they a worthy top 25, top 20 basketball team? I think they are in this current model of the edition of basketball that we're playing. So I'll take Florida State in a close one that ends up turning into knocking some free throws down to push it out to maybe a 10-point win in the end. But fellas, I want to thank you guys so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys had fun, and I hope we get to do more of this stuff. I think the roundtables are fun, really exciting for the fans who follow both podcasts, and hope you guys stay safe. I hope you guys have a happy New Year. If we don't talk before tomorrow evening, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was fun.
I'll see you both in Tucker Center on Saturday. Hopefully our predictions come true.
Take care. Thanks for joining us, guys.
All right. Tug Talk Ariya Massoudi, Bob Ferrante, Michael Rogner, and Matt Minnick, Osceola, and Tomahawk Nation Roundtable. Hope you guys all have a great holiday and a great new year, and we'll talk to you in 2021.